Hello everyone, welcome to Sarushi classes. So let's start reading chapter number 4 of NCERT class 8 history, that is Tribals, Dikus and the Vision of the Golden Age. So in the 1895 a man named Birsa was seen roaming the forest and villages of the Chota Nagpur in Bihar, and people said he had a miraculous power. He could cure all the diseases and multiply grains. Birsa himself declared that God had appointed him to save his people from trouble, free them from the slavery of Dikus, that is outsiders. Soon, thousands began following Birsa, believing that he was Bhagwan, that is God, and had come to solve all their problems. So Birsa was born in the family of Mundas. Munda is a tribal group that lies in the Chota Nagpur, but his followers included other tribals of the region like Santhals and Oraons. So all of them in the different way were unhappy with the changes they were experiencing and the problems they were facing under the British rule. So their familiar ways of life seems to be disappearing. Their livelihoods were under threat and their region appeared to be in danger. So here you will see figure 1 which shows a woman of a Dongriya Kantha tribe in the Orissa wade through the river on the way to the market. So, what problem did Birsa set out to resolve? Who were the outsiders being referred to as Dikus? And how did they enslave the people of the region? So, what was happening to the tribal people under the British is another question. And their how did their lives change? So, these are some of the questions we are going to read about in this chapter. So, we have read about the tribal societies previously. So now most tribes had customs and rituals and that were very different from those laid down by the Brahmins. Hmm. So these societies also did not have the sharp social divisions that were characteristics of the caste societies. Okay, remember these societies did not have the sharp social divisions that were characteristics of the caste societies. Hmm. All those who belonged to the same tribe thought of themselves as sharing common ties with the kinship. Okay. However, this did not mean that there were no social and economic differences within the tribe. So, how did the tribal groups live? So, by the 19th century, tribal people in different parts of the India were involved in a variety of activities and some were jhum cultivators. So some of them practiced jhum cultivation, that is shifting cultivation, and this was done on small patches of land, mostly in forests. So the cultivators cut the tree tops to allow sunlight to reach the ground and burn the vegetation on the land to clear it for cultivation. So they spread the ash from the firing which contained potash to fertilize the soil. Now they use the axes to cut the trees and the hoe to scratch the soil in order to prepare it for the cultivation. So they broadcast the seeds, that is scattered the seeds on the field instead of plowing and the land sowing the seeds. Okay, so once the crop was ready and harvested, they moved to another field, and a field that being cultivated once was left fallow for several years. So this is called as shifting cultivation or the jhum cultivation. So shifting cultivators were found in hilly and forested tracts of the northeast and the central India, and the lives of these tribal peoples depended on free movements within the forest and on being able to use the land and forest for growing their crops. So that is the only way they could practice shifting cultivation. So what do you mean by fallow land? A field left uncultivated for a while so that the soil recovers fertility, known as fallow, then salty. Here is the sal tree. Sal is a tree and a mahua. What is this mahua now? A flower that is eaten or used to make alcohol. Remember, mahua is a flower that is eaten or used to make alcohol. So here is another figure that shows the Dongriya Kandha woman in Orissa takes a home a pandanus leaves from the forest to make plates. So this is still in the marriages. You will see that people used to, serve in these palace in these plates made of this pandanus leaves. Hmm. So some were hunters and gatherers. So in the many regions, tribal groups lived by hunting animals and gathering forest produce. So they saw forest as essential for survival, and the Khons was such a community living in the forest of Orissa. So they regularly went out on collective hunts, and they divided meat among themselves. They ate fruits and fruits collected from the forest and cooked food with the oil they extracted from the trees of the sal and mahua. Just now we have seen what is mahua. Mahua is a flower that is eaten or used to make alcohol. So they used many forest shrubs and herbs for medicinal purposes and sold forest produce in the local markets. The local weavers and leather workers turned to horns when they needed supplies of kusum and palash flower to color their clothes and leather. So from where did these forest people they get their supplies of the rice and the other grains? Is the question. So at time they exchanged goods, getting what they needed in return for their valuable forest produce. At another and other times they bought goods with the small amount of earnings they had, and some of them did odd job in the villages carrying loads or building roads which other laborers in the field of peasants and the farmers. So when supplies of the forest produce shrank, tribal people had to increasingly wander around in search of the work as laborers, but many of them, like Baigas of the central India, were reluctant to do work for others. And the Baigas saw themselves as the people of the forest who could only live on the produce of the forest. It was below the dignity of the Baiga to become a laborer. Become a laborer was a thing below the dignity for the Baigas. Hmm. So in this map we will see different tribes and their locations. So now we are talking about Oh, Santhal. We just talk about Santhal. So here is the Santhal and this Munda and Orion. Here is the Odisha, you will see, or northeastern. And here is the Paraja, Bonda, Kandha, Koya, Saura, and the Kons. So these are somewhere in the Odisha. So then here you will see the Baigas, Mayas and the gold again in the Orissa. In the central India or in MP nowadays, so you will see the Baigas, Banjaras and the golds. Then here in the north side, there were Bhotias and Gadis and Vian Gujus were there. Then in the western part or in the Punjab, you will see, you will find that this region, Saharia and Beels were there. Then in the Gujarat part, the Rathwa and the Van Gujars were there. Then in the Maharashtra, again you will find the Banjara community. Then here Andhra Pradesh region, you will see that the Koya, Banjara, and the Gonds were prevalent, and in the Kerala region, Mala, Irular were the prevalent. So here in the northeastern side, you will see that Apatani Nishi tribe in the Arunachal Pradesh, then Nagas in the Nagaland, and Khasi and Meiteis and Ritag and Hajaran are there in the northeastern portions of the India. Here you will see the Jarawas tribes also. So this was about it. So the Tribal groups often needed to buy and sell in order to able to get the goods that were not produced within the locality, and this led to their dependence on the traders and moneylenders. So traders came around with things for sale and sold the goods at high prices. Moneylenders gave loans with which the tribals met their cash needs, adding to what they earned. But the interest charge on the loans was usually very high. So for the tribals, the market and the commerce often mean debt and the poverty. So therefore, came to see the moneylender and trader as evil outsiders and the cause of their misery. So next is some herded animals. So many tribal groups lived by herding and rearing animals. They were pastoralists who move with their herds of cattle or sheep according to seasons. When the grass in one place was exhausted, they moved to another area, and the Van Gujars of the Punjab hills and the Labadis of the Andhra Pradesh were cattle herders. The Gaddis of the Kulu where shepherds and the Bakarwals of the Kashmir reared the goats. So we will read more about them in our history book in the next year. Okay, so now let's read source 1 of this chapter. So a time to hunt, a time to sow, a time to move to a new field. So have you ever noticed that people living in the different types of society do not share the same notion of work and time? The lives of the shifting cultivators and the hunters in different regions were regulated by the calendar and division of the task for men and women. So, William Elwin, a British anthropologist who lived among the Baigas and Koans of the Central India for many years in 1930s and 1940s, gives us a picture of what this calendar and division of the task was like. So he writes, a chait women went to clearing to cut stalks that were already reaped. Men cut large trees and go for their ritual hunt, and the hunt began at full moon from the east. Traps of the bamboos were used for huntings, and the women gathered fruits like sago, tamarind, and mushroom. Baiga women can only gather roots or kanda or mahua seeds of all the Adivasis in the central India. The Baigas were known for the best hunters, and Baisakh is the firing of the forest took place. The women gathered unburned wood to burn. Men continued to hunt, but nearer their villages and in the Jait, sowing took place and the hunting still went on from Asad to Bhado. The men worked in the field. So in the Kuar, the first beans were ripened and in the Kartik Kutki became ripe. Okay, so in the Agan, every crops was ready and in the Pus, winnowing took place. Pus was also the time of the dances and the marriages, and the Mag shifts were made to new bewars and hunting gathering was the main subsistence activity. Now the cycle describes about took place in the first year. In the second year, there was more time for hunting as only a few crops had to be sown and harvested. But since there was enough food, the men lived in the bewars. So it was only in the third year that the diet had to be supplemented with the forest produce. So you can relate that in the Marathi, Chait is called as Chaitra. Then this then what we can say. Then the Baisakh is called as Vaishakh. Then the Jait is known as the month of Jait is known as Jeshta. Ashad is known as Ashad, and Bhado is known as Bhadrapad, and Kartiki is known as the Kartik, and and Mag is known as Mag only, Margashish. So these are the some months that were celebrated that in Maharashtra they used to celebrate. Okay. Now the next here you will see in this image a Santhal girl carrying firewood, Bihar in 1946. and the children goes with their mothers to the forest to gather forest produce. So next we are going to read some took to settle cultivation. Okay. So even before the 19th century, many folk within the tribal groups had begun settling down and cultivating their fields in one place year after year. So instead of moving from place to place, so they began to use the plow and gradually got rights over the land they lived on, and in the many cases like the Mundas of the Chota Nagpur, the land belonged to the clan as a whole. All members of the clan were regarded as descendants of the original settlers. Who had first cleared the land, and therefore all of them had rights on the land. Very often, some people within the clan acquired more power than others. Some became chiefs, and the other followers, powerful men, often rented out their land instead of cultivating it themselves. And British officials saw settled tribal groups like Gonds and Santhals as more civilized than the hunters, gatherers, or shifting cultivators. Okay, so those who lived in the forest were considered to be wild and savage, and they needed to be settled and civilized. So the term Bewar, a term used in the Madhya Pradesh for shifting cultivation. Devar is a term used for shifting cultivation in the Madhya Pradesh, and previously we have seen another term that is used for shifting cultivation was what? Zoom cultivation. So, how did colonial rule affect the tribal lives? So, the lives of the tribal groups changed during British rules. So, let us see what these changes were. So, what happened to the tribal chiefs? Hmm. So before the arrival of the British in the many areas, the tribal chiefs were important people and they enjoyed a certain amount of economic powers and had the rights to administer and control their territories, right? So in some places, they had their own police and decided on the local rules of land and forest management. So under British rule, the functions and the power of the tribal chiefs changed considerably and they were allowed to keep their land titles over a cluster of villages and rent out lands, but they lost much of their administrative power and were forced to follow laws made by the British officials in India. They were forced, remember, they were forced to follow the laws that were made by the British officials in India, and they also had to pay tribute to the British and discipline the tribal groups on behalf of the British. So they lost the authority they had earlier enjoyed among their peoples and were unable to fulfill their traditional functions. So here you will see our figure number 5 that shows a long house being with a built in a village of the Nishi tribals of the northeast. So the entire village helps when log huts are built. So what happened to the shifting cultivators then? The British were uncomfortable with the groups who moved about and did not have a fixed home. So they wanted tribals groups to settle down and become peasant cultivators. Settled peasants were easier to control and administer than people who were always on the move, right? So the British also wanted a regular revenue source for the state, so they introduced land settlements. That is, they measure the land, define the rights of the each individual to the land, and fix the revenue demand for the state. So some peasants were declared landowners, others tenants. As you have seen in the chapter 2, the tenants were to pay rent to the landowners, who is in turn paid revenue to the state. So in this figure, you will see that the Bhil women, okay, these are the Bhil women cultivating in the forest in the Gujarat. So what is the location of the tribe called Bhil in India? They were found in the Gujarat. So shifting cultivation continues in many forest areas of the Gujarat. So we can see that trees have been cut. You can see these trees have been cut and land cleared to create a patches for cultivation. So the British efforts to settle Jhum cultivators was not very successful, and settled plough cultivation is not easy in the areas where water is scarce and soil is dry. So in fact, Jhum cultivators who took to plough cultivation often suffered since their fields did not produce good yield. So the Jhum cultivators in the northeast India insisted on continuing with their traditional practice, facing widespread protests, and the British had to ultimately allow them the right to carry on shifting cultivation in some parts of the forest. So here is another figure. It shows the tribal workers in a rice field in the Andhra Pradesh. So note the difference between the right cultivation in the flat plains and in the forest. Here you will see a different condition. Here you will see different cultivation. So next is the forest laws and their impact. So the life of the tribal groups, as you have seen, was directly connected to the forest. So changes in the forest laws had a considerable effect on the tribal lives, and the British extended their control over all forests and declared that forests were state property. Okay, so British extended their control over all forests and declared the forests were their state property. So some forests were classified as a reserve forest for their produce for they produce timber which the British wanted, and in these forests people were not allowed. Remember, people were not allowed to move freely, practice jhum cultivation, and collect fruits or hunt animals. People were not allowed to do these things. So, how were jhum cultivators to survive in this situation? Is the question. So many were therefore forced to move to other areas in search of work and livelihood. But once the British stopped the tribal people from living inside forests, they faced a problem. From where would the forest department get its labor to cut trees for railways, sleepers, and to transport logs? Okay, so this was the question in front of the British. So the colonial officials came up with a solution, and they decided that they would give June cultivators a small patches of land in the forest and allow them to cultivate these on the condition that those who lived in the villages would have to provide labor to the forest department and look after the forest. So, in many regions, the forest department established forest villages to ensure a regular supply of cheap labor. A sleeper. Sleeper is the horizontal plank of wood on which railway lines are laid. Remember what is a sleeper? Sleeper is the horizontal plank of the wood on which railway lines are laid. Hmm. So let's read another source, that is source number 2 in this chapter. So in this land of the English, how hard it is to live. So in the 1930s, Varial Elvin visited the land of the Baigas, a tribal group in the central India. He wanted to know about them and their customs and practices and their arts and the folklore. So he recorded many songs and lamented the hard time the Baigas were having under the British rule. So in this land of the English, how hard it is to live, how hard it is to lie. So in the village sits the landlord, in the gate sits the kotwar, in the garden sits the patwari, in the field sits the government. In this land of the English, how hard it is to lie, how hard it is to lie. To pay cattle tax, we have to sell a cow. To pay forest tax, we have to sell a buffalo. And to pay land tax, we have to sell bullock. So how are we to go our foods? How are we to go get our foods? So in this land of the English, how hard it is to live. How hard it is to live. So this was the song made by the Baigas. So they used to sing the songs, and that shows the condition of the Baigas when they were under the British rule. Baigas are basically Adivasis, or you can say tribal groups. So here is the another picture where the Godara women are weaving. Here you will see the weaving practices, and these are the Godara women. They were engaged in the weaving practices. So many tribal groups reacted against the colonial forest laws, and they disobeyed the new rules, continued with the practices that were declared illegal, and at times rose in the open rebellion. Such was the revolt of Sonagram Sangama in 1906 in Assam. Okay, remember this. Sonagram Sangama is the in 1906 is the revolt in the Assam and the forest satyagraha of the 1930s in the central provinces. Is the revolt that was against the British by the Adivasi community or tribal communities. So the problems with the trade. So during the 19th century, tribal groups found that traders and the moneylenders were coming into the forest more often and wanting to buy forest produce, offering cash loans and asking them to work for the wages. It took tribal groups some time to understand the consequences of what was happening, and let us consider the case of the silk rover. In the 18th century, Indian silk was in the demand in the European market. Now, the fine quality of the Indian silk was highly valued and exports from India increased rapidly. As the market expanded, East India Company officials tried to encourage silk production to meet the growing demand. So Hazaribagh in the present day Jharkhand, remember the Hazaribagh which is present day in the Jharkhand was an area where Santals reared cocoons. Now, the traders dealing in the silk sent in their agents who gave loan to the tribal people and collected the cocoons. The grower were paid rupees 3 to 4 for 1,000 cocoons, and these were then exported to the Burdwan or the Gaya where they were sold at a 5 times the price. The middlemen, so called because they arranged the deals between the exporters and the silk growers. Okay, so the middleman, so called because they arrange the deals between the exporters and the silk growers and made huge profits. Even nowadays, there are brokers who are they are the middlemen and between the customers and the builders who want builders are the people who build the buildings and they want to sell their flats or constructed structure and the customers are the persons who wanted to buy the flats. So these middlemen again get a huge amount of profits. So the silk growers earned very little, and understandably, many tribal groups saw the market and the trader as their main enemies. Okay, understandably, many tribal groups saw the market and the traders as their enemy. So here you will see image figure number 9, a Hajang woman. So she is a Hajang woman weaving a mat. She is weaving a mat. For a woman, domestic work was not confined to the home. Remember, for a woman, domestic work was not confined to the home. They carried their babies with them to fields and the factories. So here is the another figure which is the coal miners, which shows the coal miners of the Bihar in 1948, and in the 1920s about 50% of the miners in the Jharia and Raniganj coal mines of the Bihar were tribals. Work deep down in the dark and suffocating mines was not only back-breaking and dangerous, it was often literally killing, and in the 1920s over 2,000 workers died every year in the coal mines in India. See the miserable lives of these people during the British times when they were working in the coal mines. Hmm, so pathetic. Anyways, so the search for the work. So the plight of the tribals who had to go far away from their homes in search of work was even worse. From the late 19th century, tea plantations started coming up and mining became an important industry. Tribals were recruited in a large numbers to work the tea plantations of Assam and the coal mines of the Jharkhand. They were recruited through contractors who paid them miserably low wages. Remember, they recruited through the contractors, and these contractors paid them miserably low wages and prevented them from returning home. Hmm. So let's have a closer look. So through the 19th and the 20th century, tribal groups in the different parts of the country rebelled. they rebelled against the changes in the laws, the restrictions on their practices, and the new taxes they had to pay, and exploitations by the traders and moneylenders. Now, the Coles rebelled in 1831-32. Remember, first were the Coles who rebelled in the 1831 to 32. Then Santhal rose in the revolt in 1855, and the Bastar rebellion in the central India broke out in 1910, and the Warali revolt in the Maharashtra in 1940. Okay, remember, first are the Coles rebelled in the 1831 to 32, then Santhal rose revolt in 1855, then Bastar rebellion in the central India broke in 1910, and then Warli revolt in the Maharashtra in 1940. So the movement that Birsa led was one such movement. Let's read something about the Birsa Munda. In the beginning of this chapter, we just saw the Birsa. Okay, so the Birsa was born in mid 1817, the son of the poor father. He grew up around the forest of the Bahonda. Remember, he grew up around the forest of the Bahonda, grazing sheep, playing the flute, and dancing in the local akhara. So, forced by poverty, his father had to move from place to place looking for work, and as an adolescent, Birsa heard tales of Munda uprising of the past and saw the Sardars, leaders of the community, urging the people to revolt. They talked of golden age when the Mundas had been free of oppression of Diku, and said there would be a time when the ancestral right of the community would be restored. They saw themselves as a descendant of the original settlers of the region and fighting for their land, that is Mulki Larai, remaining people of the need to win back their kingdom. So Birsa went to local missionary school and listened to the sermons of the missionaries. There too he heard it as that it was possible for Mundas to attain the kingdom of heaven and regain their lost rights. So this would be possible if they became good Christians and gave their bad practices. So later Birsa also spent some time in the company of the prominent Vaishnav preacher, and he wore the sacred thread and began to value the importance of the purity and the pity. So Birsa was deeply influenced by many of the ideas he came in touch with in his growing up years, and his movement was aimed at reforming tribal society. He urged the Mundas to give up drinking liquor, clean their village, and stop believing in the witchcraft and sorcery. Okay. So, but we must remember that Birsa also turned against missionaries and Hindu landlords. He saw them as outside forces and were ruining the Munda's way of life. So, in the 1895, Birsa urged his followers to recover their glorious past, and he talked of a golden age in the past as Satyug, the age of the truth, when the Mundas lived a good life, constructed embankments, tapped natural springs, planted trees and orchards, and practiced cultivations to earn their living. So they did not kill their brethren and relatives, and they lived honestly. Birsa also wanted people to once again work on their land, settle down, and cultivate their fields. So what worried British officers most was the political aim of the Birsa movement. So this was the reason because of which British officials were now worried. So for it wanted to drive out missionaries, money lenders, Hindu landlords, and the government, and set up a Munda Raj with a Birsa at its head. The movement identified all these forces as a cause of misery in the Munda were suffering. So the land policies of the British were destroying their traditional land system. Hindu landlords and money lenders were taking over their land, and missionaries were criticizing their traditional culture. As a movement spread, British officials decided to act. They arrested Birsa in 1895, convicted him on the charges of rioting, and jailed him for 2 years. When Birsa released in 1897, he began touring the villages to gather support. He used traditional symbols and language to rouse people, urging them to destroy Ravana, Dikus, and the Europeans and establish a kingdom under his leadership. Birsa's followers began targeting the symbols of the Diku and European powers, and they attacked police stations and churches and raided the property of moneylenders and zamindars. So they raised the white flag as a symbol of Birsa Raj. So in the 19th century, Birsa died of cholera. In the 1900, Birsa died out of the cholera, and the movement faded out. However, the movement was significant in at least two ways. First, it forced the colonial government to introduce laws so that the land of the tribal could not be easily taken over by the Dikus. And second, it showed once again that the tribal people had the capacity to protest against injustice and express their anger against colonial rule. They did this in their own specific way, inventing their own rituals and symbolic symbols of struggle. So this was about it. So what is Vaishnav? Vaishnavs are the worshippers of the Vishnu. So okay. So So just let's read another source, that is source number 3. So blood trickles from my shoulders. So the songs the Mundas sang bemoan their misery. Alas, under the drudgery of the forced labor, blood trickles from my shoulders day and night. The emissary from the zamindar annoys and irritates me days and night. I groan, alas, this is my condition. I do not have a home. Where shall I get happiness? Alas. This is the another song of the Mundas. So the source is the K.S. Singh's Birsa Munda and his movements, page number 12. So elsewhere, so what was happening at that time in the rest of the world, or say another part than that of India. So why do we need cash? The title. So there are many reasons why tribals and the other social groups often do not wish to produce for the market. And this tribal song from Papua New Guinea gives us a glimpse of how the tribals there viewed the market. Okay, so these tribal songs from Papua New Guinea gives us a glimpse of how the tribals viewed the market. So we say cash. It's unsatisfactory trash. We say cash is unsatisfactory trash. It won't keep off rain and it gives me pain. So why should I work my guts from coconut trees for these government mutts? Cash cropping is all very well if you have got something to sell. But tell me, sir, why, if there is nothing to buy, should I bother? This was the song adapted from a song quoted in the Cohen Clark and the Haswell Ed's The Economy of Subsistence Agriculture in 1917. So with this we have come to an end of this chapter. Do subscribe to our channel for more such lectures. Thank you.